Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Legends of Sport podcast. As always, I'm your host, Andy Bernstein. Here at Legends of Sport, we have found that legends come in all walks of life in the world of sports. Over the years, we have brought you interviews with legendary athletes, broadcasters, sports writers, owners, and even superfans. Today's guest is a first, as we get to bring a legendary NBA referee to all of you. Bob Delaney was a stellar NBA referee for 24 years. He followed his time on the court with 7 years off the court in officiating management roles for the NBA. That career in itself would have certainly filled the job description and criteria as a legend for this podcast. However, Bob Delaney's life and contributions to society go well beyond the whistle. Bob started his working life as a New Jersey state trooper. Very early in his career, he was asked to go undercover, and for 3 years, he infiltrated the mob in the New Jersey, New York, Pennsylvania area, which resulted in putting some really bad guys behind bars. During that time, Bob adopted the persona of Bobby Covert, which he so eloquently describes in his 2008 book, Covert. Transitioning back to Bob Delaney from Bobby Covert was difficult, and Bob found peace in running up and down the court refereeing basketball games, starting with high school, then the CBA, and eventually leading to a long career as a top official in the NBA. Bob shares all of this history during our conversation. He also shares his battles with post traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD, during and after his experience undercover. Bob has now made it his life's work to educate and lead the way in PTSD research, prevention, and treatment. His book, Surviving the Shadows, details his personal battles as well as those of many he has helped. Our friend Kevin Love says it so eloquently. Everyone is going through something, and that is certainly the case with those suffering from PTSD, be it first responders, military, refugees, frontline COVID workers, and even athletes in transition post-career. I want to thank Bob for bringing PTSD out of the shadows and sharing his story in his books and with me on this episode so that we can bring it to all of you. Enjoy this conversation with the legendary Bob Delaney. And as always, I'll see you on the backside. Welcome, my good friend Bob Delaney, to the Legends of Sport podcast. First of all, it's just wonderful to see you. I haven't seen you in a while. None of us have really seen anybody in a while.
Yeah.
but it's so wonderful to see you because, I was so used to seeing you, I don't know, every fifth game or so, I would see you on the court. So to see you live and in person is wonderful. So how you been,
Yeah.
man?
Good, thanks, Andy. Great to be with you. Yeah, you're great taking me down memory lane. It
Yeah,
was like 1986 in the Forum
I know.
when I first started, and
Yeah,
then on through my years of refereeing, and then into the time that I was director of officials. So
yeah.
got to see you a great deal, and do miss you as well. And it's nice that we're all getting back again,
I
and
know, man. I
to
know that.
whatever this new normal is.
I don't know. Well, yeah. What does normal mean? We have no idea. And in your life, that's a subject in itself. What normal means, but and we'll get into that, Bob. So, listen, man. I just finished reading your second to latest book, right?
Mhm.
After rereading this book, which I loved the first time I read it. And now I got to get your third book, right? Which is Heroes Are Human, which it just came out or it's coming out, right? This year at some point?
Heroes Are Human. Lessons in Resilience, Courage, and Wisdom from the COVID Front Lines
Mm-hmm.
is it launched on April 12th for pre-sales,
Mm-hmm.
and it will be out in September
That's
where the book
fantastic.
release will take place.
That's so great. Well, Bob, I know you for years and years, a million years. I don't know how many specifically, but as an NBA referee, right, and as a good friend, and somebody who always, had a kind word and shake my hand, ask me how I was doing, my family, and everything. But until I read Covert, I, had no idea you had another life, and to me, it feels like you had like three lives because you started off as a New Jersey state trooper and then became undercover agent, infiltrating the mob. And then you became an NBA referee, and now you're on a mission to raise awareness about PTSD. And I was trying to find the common intertwining theme here, racking my brain all last week and this weekend trying to figure it out. So maybe we can do that together. You know?
Yeah, that would be helpful to me as well. Thank you.
Yeah, good. That's awesome, man. So Bob, tell me, let's go back to the beginning, okay? You know, you grew up in Jersey, and your dad was a New Jersey state trooper. You felt that that's the path you wanted to take, but very early in your career, it was presented to you this opportunity to be, undercover, infiltrate the mob. Project Alpha was born. You had no idea it was going to be a 3-year
No.
life-changing operation, right? So can you walk us through that? Because, reading Covert again, it just blew my mind how you had to completely change your life around, and the after effects of that.
Yeah, growing up in Paterson, New Jersey, my dad was a state trooper. He retired as a captain in the state police, and I worked for him at one point. But yeah, I never really had the idea I wanted to be a state trooper until I was in college. Early days, I grew up Irish Catholic, and so I thought I wanted to be a priest until I learned about really what that word celibate meant, and then I had a whole different understanding of where I wanted to go. And then, and so in my college, for some reason, it hit me in college that I wanted to become a state trooper. I saw it as serving the state, as serving the community. And I left college in my senior year because the state police had not given a test in quite some time. And I was afraid that if I stayed, and by then I knew that the NBA would not be calling. I was playing basketball in college, and I got Budweiseritis over my junior to senior year, and I couldn't even touch the rim anymore. So I left early. I told the players I was like them. I came out early and went to law enforcement. And I was about a year on the job. And it was a heck of a gig back then. The organization, the New Jersey State Police, was founded by Colonel H. Norman Schwarzkopf, the father of the famed General H. Norman Schwarzkopf of the Gulf Wars. And he brought down with, when he started it, he brought the military style training. So it was a 23-week resident course that I went through in Seagirt, New Jersey. And it was a heck of a gig back then. We worked 2 days on, 2 days off. It was like a fire station, but for cops. And we were the local cops for towns that didn't have their own police department, as well as doing the miles and smiles on the highway, the tickets and the accidents. And so it was at my third station, Somerville. I walked in after 2 days off, and you start to get a little cocky and you think you know everything. And they try to make you feel good about yourself in a squad room. They have this little cubby hole with your name on it, as if that's your office. And there was a note to call Lieutenant Jack Liddy, Division Headquarters, Criminal Investigation Section, Organized Crime Bureau. This guy had more titles next to his name than I ever saw. And I just told you I grew up Irish Catholic. That means I wake up guilty in the morning. I thought I did something wrong. I thought I had a problem on my hands. And the other troopers said, relax, kid. Give him a call. You probably gave a ticket to a mob guy he wants to talk to. And so I called, and the lieutenant said, are you going to be in for a while? I said, yes, sir. He said, I'll meet you in the kitchen in about an hour and a half. Every police station was the same because we lived there. It was a police station, second and third floor were our bedrooms, 2 troopers every room. Downstairs was ping pong table, kitchen. And when he said, I'll meet you in the kitchen, knew exactly what he meant. And so I'm there an hour and a half later, and in walks this intimidating figure. Lieutenant Liddy stands about 6'4". He's the kind of guy that hangs on his lapels when he speaks to you. He's also the kind of guy that the button on the shirt has never met the hole on the shirt, right? He's wearing a 16 when it should be a 19 by now. And after a period of time of speaking, he said, are you interested in doing undercover work? I said, yes, sir. And he turned and walked away. He said, Lieutenant, what is it? Drugs, narcotics?
Yeah.
Back then, all we were doing is buy bust on the street. He said, you keep asking questions, you're going to be out of the run. Over the next 3 weeks, I learned that the President's Organized Crime Task Force out of Washington, D.C., the FBI and New Jersey State Police were going to join forces. And we were going to start a trucking company on the waterfront in New Jersey. I became one of those undercover guys.
Incredible, Bob. I mean, the way you lay it out in the book is cinematic, to say the least. A lot of us saw Donnie Brasco. We kind of get the idea of a normal person kind of going into that world and having to become. You became Bobby Covert,
right?
Which in itself, the name itself, and I saw a couple of interviews with you. It's just hilarious that None of these wise guys actually figured out what covert meant.
Yeah. We weren't trying to be cute or funny. We
Right.
actually took on the identity of a child who died at birth. The death records and birth records are not cross-indexed in our country. So Robert Allen Covert was born to Carol Stevens. His father was Elmer Covert. He was born in November 1949. I was born November 1951. What we tried to do is keep things very simple, right? Same first name, ethnic sounding last name, birth, age, kind of similar. And that way you develop your persona. So back then, the word covert was not as popular. It wasn't until post Watergate that it became more of a word. Back then, it was narc or street agent that was being referred to. But as you said, really, as years go on, it becomes more and more like, you got to be kidding me. Your name was Bobby Covert? I mean, I was interviewed once and somebody said to me, why don't you just call yourself Bobby Undercover?
Right, exactly. Yeah. Well, Bob, all the details of being Bobby Covert and what you guys had to do at the trucking company and how you infiltrated the mob and most importantly, how you got all those guys to trust you. And you truly had to adopt this other persona. And it wasn't really until I read Surviving in the Shadows that I Surviving the Shadows that I realized really how damaging that must have been for you during the time. I mean, you talked very eloquently about having made relationships and feeling guilty once these guys came up on the stand, almost guilty that you're turning in almost friends, people who you had befriended, they befriended you. When we talk about PTSD, which wasn't really spoken about or really discussed, battle fatigue, you called it, from what, World War I. What did you call it from World War II?
Well, it's been around forever, Andy.
Yes, I know.
Sophocles wrote 2 plays about the warrior not knowing how to act after coming home from battle. After the Civil War, it was referred to as soldier's heart. After World War I, it was shell shock. Battle fatigue after World War II. The Korean and Vietnam Wars, we referred to it as flashbacks. In 1980, it became a diagnosis known as post-traumatic stress disorder.
Right.
And so when I surfaced from doing the undercover work, and as you said, there was a great deal of guilt, there was shame, there were all these feelings that I was hiding because I was being told some people were referring to me and say, you're a hero, you're a tough guy. And I was none of those things. And I've come to learn in doing work with the military, firefighters, law enforcement, now the healthcare providers, healthcare workers, when that title of hero is given to someone, the person that gets it does not like it. They know who they are. And, when people were telling me I was a tough guy for doing what I did, they didn't see me at 2:00 in the morning walking around my house with my gun out, pushing shower curtains back because I was paranoid they were coming to get me. So all of these internal feelings took me years to be able to process and to share with folks. To be able to say what I say freely to you has taken years upon years. But what I do know is that in becoming a student and becoming understanding and delving into this, that the more that we share, sharing allows healing. And I use this analogy. If I had a big balloon in front of the room and all your listeners could see this big balloon full of air, how do I get the air out of the balloon? I could take a pin and pop it, but then I don't have a balloon anymore. I can let it go. It flies all over the room and goes out the door. We don't know what happened to the balloon. But if we're patient and willing to listen to sounds we do not want to hear, and it may hurt our ears, and we turn it upside down, we let a little air at a time, it makes that god-awful screeching noise. Eventually we get all the air out of the balloon, we'll have a full balloon we can use again one day. That's us with dealing with trauma. We need to get the air out of our balloons, but more often, what do? We push down one on top of another, saying, I can handle it. And those who wear uniforms, whether it be the uniform I used to wear, the military uniform, firefighters, or lab coats and scrubs in this fight against COVID-19, like to think of themselves as being able to leap tall buildings in a single bound. They can handle it. And while this is a human condition, not a mental illness, those who serve either go where trauma is or trauma comes to them. And so you're getting hit with the shrapnel, emotional shrapnel of other folks.
Yeah. Well, you have a great quote in Covert where you say, quote, despite my success as an undercover agent and the landmark breakthroughs of our Project Alpha operation, Those years living with a false identity cast me into a world of darkness. And in those days, Bob, was there somebody, were there resources to talk about it? Was it just too much of a macho society that just like sort of, my grandfather used to say, get over it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Was it like that? I mean, you do speak about a colleague that did reach out to you, that was sort of monitoring you. Can you talk about how this first kind of came to light as something you needed to talk about?
Yeah, what had happened shortly after the investigation ended, and on the last day that I thought was going to be the greatest day of my life, when we lock all these guys up and I come back to being Bob Delaney, because this job, from that initial conversation that I had with Lieutenant Liddy, I was told this is going to be 6 months.
Yeah.
Because every federal grant is written for 6 months, and we were being optimistic. Like in the state of New Jersey, we were going to end organized crime in 6 months, and we learned very quickly that wasn't going to happen. And so with the small trucking company, we started a larger trucking company. I became the president of that trucking company. And so on this last day, we had become partners with the Genovese and Bruno crime families, and we're kicking back money and making cases. We're going to lock these guys up. And I'm going to go back to being who I am. And I was assigned to be with Sergeant Barry Lardier, and Barry was in plain clothes, and he had a state police ID on the outside of him. And I had nothing when you're in deep cover, you have nothing that says you're who you really are. And he said to me, as the defendants started to be brought in early morning hours, we had mustered up at the West Orange Armory in West Orange, New Jersey. And he started bringing them in around 4 or 5 in the morning after they hit houses. And he said, you want to go see what's going on? I said, yes, when I meant no. Because now I got to go face to face with them. So that military bearing, I put myself at parade rest, arms behind my back, head up, shoulders back. I'm going to look him in the eye. And it was a guy named Ronnie Sardella being fingerprinted by a trooper. And I had stolen tractor trailers with him, did gun deals with him, dope dealers. Mob guy, been to his house for dinner, knew his wife, knew his kids. A friend, for lack of a better term. And he looked over at me and he said, Bobby, what they pinch you for? And before I could answer, Sergeant Lardier said, he's not pinched, he's with us, he's a trooper. And the look that went between Ronnie and I was not one of anger. It was one of hurt and disappointment. He said, Bobby, how can you do that to us? How can you do it to me? I'm your friend. When I present, I say, freeze frame, go back to St. Mary's Grammar School, Patterson, New Jersey. I was taught by the Good Sisters of St. Dominic. I got caught in 4th grade doing something wrong. Sister Joseph Rozier told me I was going to be punished. I says, before she told me what the punishment was, I said, sister, Jimmy DeLull is doing it too. I gave up my best friend in a heartbeat. And the ring that says the Good Sisters are married to God, that's also there to put welts on your head. She cracked me. And she said, Delaney, you don't tell on your friends. It's an unwritten rule on the schoolyard. We don't tell on our friends. Sure. And yet I became friends with people and told them. So the shame and this guilt and this, all these feelings that I used to refer to as an emotional roller coaster, more like emotional violence inside of me. I didn't understand what was going on. And I had death threats, innuendo death threats that took place afterwards. And so the state police put troopers around me. One happened to be John Schroth, who you're referring to, a detective who had a background in psychology from Rutgers University. And John started seeing in me different actions, because for somebody that wanted to get away from doing this, 3 weeks after I surfaced, I got the leather coat on. I got the chains around my neck. I got the pinky ring going. I'm going back into being Bobby Covert instead of getting away from it, because that was my new normal. And then, with the surveillance team that they had on me, we would be out late and doing surveillances because I had to identify people. We'd stop for a drink. I'd start buying everybody drinks. And Schroth was the one that says to me, what are you doing, pal? That's not Fed money anymore. That's your mortgage money. You're hurting yourself. I push him away. I was speaking around the United States. I was going all over telling this story, giving testimony before the United States Senate, giving briefings to Congress, because they all wanted to hear. Organized crime, the mafia, was a main focus of law enforcement all through 50s, 60s, early 70s, into the early 80s. And a guy by the name of Hank Campbell was in the audience. Dr. Hank Campbell was my college psychology professor at New Jersey City University. And he and I started doing some informal therapy. And he was the first one that said to me, Bobby, what you're going through is post-traumatic stress disorder. I pushed him away. I said, Hank, you don't know what you're talking about. And anybody that wanted to help me, I pushed away. And then I got lucky for the third time. Louis Free, who the name may resonate, he was a street agent, FBI agent, worked my case, worked another case in New York. with another undercover agent. And Louis became the 15th director of the FBI. And when I surfaced, and after Joe, the other undercover agent, surfaced, he put us together. And that agent was who you referred to earlier, Donnie Brasco, Joe Pistone. And the first time I spoke with Joe, we were out at Governor's Island over in New York. And I looked in his eyes, read his body language, heard his words. I knew he got what I was going through. And it was my first introduction to peer-to-peer conversation. I used to refer to it as peer-to-peer therapy. But I try to take away every medical sounding term when having this conversation, because I think we have over-medicalized this subject. And the stigma that is around it is what pushes people away. And when I say over-medicalized, please don't interpret that I'm saying we don't need the medical side of the house. We do. We just have to figure out, how do we build a better, stronger bridge from those who need these resources to the resources. And when I speak with docs and psychologists, psychiatrists, I say they have to move the bar too. And a bridge comes from both sides. And we have to meet to be able to meet people where they need to be met in order to provide the resources.
Absolutely. Yeah, you also say in the book, you say, quote, PTSD is an invisible condition and left untreated can lead to devastating consequences. So I've been in the recovery world 21 years almost, right? The first step, obviously, is admitting you got a problem, right? To yourself. The second step really is to tell somebody else who might be sharing the same thing. You feel completely alone, like you're the only one in the world who's dealing with this, who has the shame or whatever that you walk around with every day. You're basically leading two lives, right? And the biggest theme I got, the biggest takeaway I got from your book was peer-to-peer discussion, counseling, however you want to use the word, therapy, because everybody, as Kevin Love says, and he said it on my podcast, he said it a million times, everybody's going through something. But what's amazing, the rest of that sentence is, and they're probably going through the same thing you are, right? If you don't talk about it, I just saw a great interview with Michael Phelps that Chris Paul did on his show. And, Michael said the same thing, that, he spent years and years thinking he's the only guy going through this stuff, depression and everything else. He's winning gold medals, Olympic after Olympics. So that seems to be your sort of marching orders now, that you have taken it on yourself to get the word out for peer-to-peer counseling, peer-to-peer discussion, right?
Andy, I've been doing this for 4 decades. I've been talking about it for since I surfaced. It took me about 3 to 4 years to be able to get to the point that I started being honest about the conversations. And those first 3 to 4 years, I was hiding so much, and I was living the life of a fraud, quite honestly. And so that feelings that are inside of you, you hope that no one else has to go through it. And so you want to be a messenger. And I became a student of this, and I became an advocate, and I have such a thirst for knowledge about understanding trauma and what it does to us. I was good at doing undercover work. We're all good at doing something. And I'd have the kiss on the cheek and hang out with the mob guys. But then I'd get in the car and 2 miles down the road, I had to pull over and throw my guts up, or find the first gas station because I had diarrhea. I'd wake up in the middle of the night, my bed was soaking wet. I didn't tell anybody those things because I felt like they would think I was a coward. They would think I was afraid. It took me a long time to come to understand this. Courage is not absent of fear. Courage takes place despite the fear that you're feeling. And getting that message to those who serve, because they are in the higher risk group for this. But we are all, this is a human condition. And as you said, if you and I have a conversation in a safe environment and are honest with each other, know that we can have that trusting conversation, I give you permission to tell me your story. And then we validate each other's story. And so that validation is what's important, that I don't feel I'm on an island, that I'm the only one that's going through something like this. And the more that we have these conversations, the more that we allow that freedom of that, using that analogy of the air out of the balloon. I'm big on the analogies. I use one, like I'll get up from a group and ask, how much does this bottle of water weigh? And it's a 16-ounce bottle of water that's half empty. So it's only about 8 ounces. Easy to carry, right? No big deal.
Yeah.
But if I stand here for 30 days holding it like this, you come back, I'm going to be a pain in the neck to be around, because even though it's light, it's going to pull on my shoulder and going to make me irritable. This is the stuff we carry.
Yeah.
We think it's not much,
right?
But until we ask someone to help us carry it or learn how to put it down and walk away from it, are we going to be able to interact with it? I'm not speaking about ending post-traumatic stress. What I'm talking about is how do we navigate and how do we interact with it? Right. And you brought up Surviving the Shadows. The reason I came up with that title is I believe we all have shadows, just as you just said. We all have stuff. We all have shadows. But in order for a shadow to exist, that means there's light nearby.
Yeah, I love that.
It's our obligation to ourselves and to each other to get to that light.
Yeah, no, I love that. I love that. Even in the darkest cave, a single strand of light will light up a cave, right? Light up the darkness. So, Bob, it seems to me, and you talk about it in the book, that preventive measures are probably what's really necessary. When troops are sent into the front lines, law enforcement is sent out there. I mean, were you given any training whatsoever, like what to expect at that first car accident, which you talk about in the book? What to expect? I'm sure soldiers are not given any training as to, it's not like the rookie transition program in the NBA, like where you sort of prepared a little bit, prepare these guys for what's coming. So doesn't it seem like there's a void there, that there's a missing piece, because you could treat it before it happens almost?
Yeah, we're moving the bar. So my era, prior to me, up to my time in law enforcement, it was, they would show you photographs of homicides. They would show you. Today, there's a lot more. Like next week, I speak at the State Police Academy in New Jersey concerning resiliency and self-care and understanding trauma. So we've moved the bar, and we have moved this bar in our society, because think about Simone Biles' situation. I see that as such a celebration and a victory in understanding trauma, because how this has evolved, it comes in small bites. And while some people said some negative things about Simone, the larger percentage was supportive.
Yeah.
Because when we became educated about what twisties, that's not the yips. That's not just missing putts off to the side. Right. And I'm not minimizing that. But what I'm saying is we are becoming more knowledgeable and more accepting and more mature in our conversation about this. And that's where the change starts to come. And it has to continue. It's like what Popovich always talks about. The rock doesn't break on the last time you hit it and it broke. It's all those strikes that took place before. Right. And so that's the same thing here. We've got to continue to have this conversation, open conversations, honest, where people feel comfortable to have the conversation. And peer-to-peer, to me, is extremely important. Someone who has gone through something similar. And I heard that over and over. See, I believe we're judgmental about trauma. And what I mean judgmental is not me to Andy and Andy to me. It's judgmental within ourselves. And we minimize what we experience. We even verbalize it that way. We say someone else is going through something worse than I am. That way it pushes it down and maximizes there. And I heard it on the pile in 9/11. I would hear from cops, don't worry about us, go talk to the firefighters. They went through something worse, because they were minimizing what they experienced. Yeah. At Fort Hood, when I was brought there for the shootings, General Cohn brought me in, and I spent weeks there. I spoke with the general and said, we have to change our procedure here, because we were bringing everybody together to have a conversation. And what I was hearing is, sir, I was across the post. I'm okay. Well, that person across the post was experiencing their own level of trauma, but they didn't want to speak in front of people that were actually in the building when the shooting took place. So you have to be that aware of what peer-to-peer is. It is about, for example, traumatic brain injury and a loss of a leg are both wounded warriors, but there's a difference in what their wounds are and what their experiences are with their families. So having those folks speak together and break it up into peer being at the highest level that it can be.
Yeah. I see you have the TAPS frame behind you, and yes. I've been fortunate to be around various times when Coach K would bring the group from TAPS into the USA training camp or to a game, before we headed off to the Olympics and all that. An amazing organization, because it gives the survivors, the families, a chance to, I guess, share with each other, to feel a camaraderie through all this tremendous grief, right?
Yeah,
And I can't help to think, Bob, that, with what's going on in Ukraine now, I mean, I saw something this morning about a 7-year-old boy who had to go back to his blown out house in Mariupol because he had always had his birthday picture taken in the living room, and it was a shell of a place. I mean, how is that kid going to grow up now? Right. I mean, the hundreds of thousands of people who will survive this trauma won't be killed in it, but they're going to carry it the rest of their lives.
Yeah, and the Bonnie Carroll, who you've probably met with TAPS, is the founder of TAPS. I'm on the advisory board. She's in Poland right now. TAPS is involved on the ground. Yeah. My hope is to be there sometime in July, June or July. I'm sure you've met General Bob Brown over the years. Bob would always come in. He played for Coach K at West Point, and K said Bob was one of the few guys that could have played for him at Duke, that played for him at West Point. And as an aside, I spent a lot of time with Bob Brown when he was a general in Iraq, and he and I had a shooting contest along the Syrian border one time. He in full military gear and me with a body armor on. We came across this hoop. He did beat me, but I was smart enough. I wasn't going to beat the general on his home turf. He's the one guarding me. So, but yeah, these kinds of things that are taking place in Ukraine. A good friend, a mentor, someone that I do work with now is the director of the Harvard Global Mental Health Programs, and it's Dr. Richard Malika. And he has a saying that trauma is inescapable in life. It's inescapable. And so if we take that as a true statement, we should become more knowledgeable as to what trauma does, and not be afraid to have these conversations so we as human beings can navigate it. Now, when we're speaking about the Ukraine situation, this is generational. This is multi-generational that is taking place, right? This anger and fear and all that's taking place will be passed on to that 7-year-old's children, on and on and on. Right. I've done work and been to the Clonard Monastery over in Ireland, where the peacekeeping wall is, with the Protestant Catholics. This is generational. There's anger and hatred that they don't even know why there's anger and hatred anymore, right? So this carries on, and there has to be a stopping of the cycle. And how do you do it? You do it through figuring out how. Father Alex Reed said, he worked at the Clonard Monastery, was instrumental in the peacekeeping in the 80s, said that we are told to love our neighbor. But how can you love your neighbor if you don't know your neighbor? We have to know each other. And so I'm a optimist at that. I believe that human beings are truly good. Unfortunately, evil does show up. I've worked against evil. I've seen evil in action, and I have seen what the victims of criminals can happen. I've been in war zones. Like I said, I'm planning to be in Poland because I believe our troops have to be given time to have their conversations as well, right? I mean, they're on the border not knowing if there's going to be a war that they're involved in. And so they have kinds of issues that need to be spoken about as well, but not in front of the world, in small groups. Once a month, I'm with a special forces group, whether it be Navy SEALs, Army Rangers, and we have these kinds of conversations, Green Berets. We have amazing men and women serving us in this country in so many ways. And I believe we have an obligation to them. And for me, I just want to share this story, if you allow me, to underline what I mean by their service. When one of my first trips to Iraq, I was with Tim Dwight. If you remember, Tim played for in the NFL, played at Iowa as an All-American. And he and I, when we got there, it took us like 48 to, 3-4 days to get there. And we finally land in Mosul, and we're at Camp Merez with General Bob Brown, who was a 1-star at the time. And they would chop us around, and I would go do the post-traumatic stress program, and we'd do, just hang out with the troops. We were embedded with the 25th Infantry for 2 weeks. On our first arrival, General Brown meets us, and we have a briefing with him, and he assigns us a CHU. I didn't know what a CHU was, a contained housing unit. And those T-walls that you see in the rock roads. And so Tim and I get into the CHU, and it's got to be around midnight. We must have talked till about 3 a.m. about what great teamwork we saw, the amazing men and women just getting us to this location, never mind what we're experiencing the next two weeks with them. We finally fall asleep around 5:30 in the morning. There was an explosion. Tim had run a touchdown back in a Super Bowl for 99 yards on a kickoff. Yeah. I beat him to the door. That's how fast I moved. Right. And when we hit the door and I looked outside, the troops were standing outside, and they just smiled at me and said, "Sir, we're okay." It was close, but not that close. They knew where danger was by sound. And I had a conversation with those soldiers. And at one point, one soldier said to me, "Sir, we do our best soldiering when we're not afraid of dying." Think of those words. Yeah. We do our best soldiering.
It's hard to comprehend. Dying. Yeah, I read that over and over in your book. Yeah.
And Andy, what it strikes me is that if they're willing to do that for people they don't even know, they're doing it for me, they're doing it for you, you're doing it for our families. We have an obligation to them. Yeah. And so if there's a way that I can help them, and people ask me all the time, would you do that undercover thing again? If you ask me right after, I'll probably say no, but today I say yes, because I had to go through that to get to where I am today. Sure. And while it was designed to put away a lot of bad people, it really was going through that experience to be able to help a lot of good people.
Yeah, I mean, I think of the first responders at 9/11 who, they knew they were going back in the building. They weren't coming out, right? They knew it. And I don't know, the guts and strength that it took to serve in that way. They might help people and not survive. It's just, I just can't, it's hard for me to get my head around it, quite honestly. So Bob, let's transition over to your life as a referee, okay? Sure. And you have this great quote towards the end of your book, Covert. You say, it's from former NBA head coach Mike Schuler. You say, quote, "There are 3 groups of people you don't mess with in this world: the FBI, the mafia, and NBA referees," right? I absolutely love that quote. So it's actually true in your life. I mean, those are the three kind of, I guess, tickets that you had to punch to get to where you are today. You started reffing as sort of therapy, yes. From what I remember. High school games, it took you like into another world, that kind of thing. You befriended, or actually Daryl Garrettson befriended you, the great Daryl Garrettson, who we all loved dearly. And all of a sudden you're in the CBA, and then boom, you get promoted up to the NBA, right? So what I find interesting, having known a lot of NBA referees, yourself included, it's being an NBA referee is a really anonymous existence, right? The NBA is very clear. They don't want you guys doing interviews. They don't want people to know who you are. You come in, you get out, boom, that's it, right? And then I also find it interesting that you chose to be in the spotlight as an NBA ref, right? After spending so much time in the shadows. So how does that all come together, Bob?
Yeah, so I played high school ball. I was All-State in New Jersey. I played college at New Jersey City University. And the game of basketball had always been a big part of my life since I was like 10 years old. And so when I surfaced from doing the cover work, I couldn't play anymore, but there was just something drawing me that that inner peace that comes from being on a basketball floor. The only way I could get back out of that floor was to referee. So I had refereed like fraternity and sorority intramural games back in college. And I started to think about it prior to the undercover work. And then when I surfaced, it drew me. And the more that I did it, the more I felt that inner peace. And so I started refereeing at the Jersey Shore Summer Pro League. Would go up to Rucker, go up to the City Pro League in New York. And Daryl happened to be at a game at the Jersey Shore and saw, and I don't think it was my play calling. I know it's not my play calling. It was my ability to be able to manage a game. because I could start seeing problems happen before they happen because of the training that I had within law enforcement, plus all the stuff that I learned on the street about being aware and having to be sensitive to what's going on around you. And one thing led to another. And I never had the intention of being an NBA referee. And it was never a goal. I thought I'd be a state trooper and retire from there and maybe referee at the college level, but got into the league. And I share it with people all the time. Find your inner peace. What gives you an inner peace? And then put yourself in that position to be in that environment. It's going to help you in so many ways.
But what I'm trying to get at, Bob, is did the anonymity of being an NBA ref kind of speak to your need to just put Bobby Covert aside and I don't know, just get back into the world as Bob Delaney? You know, maybe I don't want to get too like psychological about it because, you know, I'm not an amateur psychologist, but I'm just trying to think because it's such a solitary job. You know, you're with your two, you know, other refs. And when you started, it was only one other ref.
Right.
And, you know, I don't know. I'm just thinking about all my friends that are refs that you know so well. And yeah, they all have lives and everything else, but it's a different kind of life, man. Also, the other thing I like to say in my business, right? If I missed the shot, the patient didn't die, right?
Right.
And I've missed a lot of shots in my day. And, you know, if you get a call wrong, you know, it's not going to kill you, right? If you got a call wrong in your previous life, it would have killed you, right? If you, if you had tipped off the mob or they found your wire or what, 900 things could have happened.
Yeah.
So
you just triggered a thing. Dizzy Gillespie was doing the national anthem at a Knick game that I was working one night, and I was so excited to meet him. And as he finished the national anthem, he came off and I shook his hand. I said, "That was great." He looked at me. He said, "I missed 2 notes. If you miss 2 calls, they're going to boo you. They're not booing me." And what a great line.
Yeah.
Right? He knew he missed the 2 notes, but nobody else knew
That's
that he
hilarious.
missed the 2 notes. But you just triggered that.
That's really
I have had conversations with psychologists, psychiatrists about exactly what you're speaking about.
Yeah.
And there were a few things that probably fed a lot of what you're speaking about. There was the need to be on a stage. I had been on a stage, even though it's a stage that nobody knew. It was Covert was a stage that I was on.
Yeah.
There were so many things being taken care of with post-traumatic stress. My hypervigilance, because I had to keep looking around. The endorphins that were being released by the physical exercise that was taking place as being a referee. There were so many things that really tend to helping post-traumatic stress. And it's even interesting about the game of Dr. Naismith with the game of basketball. He was actually doing work with soldiers. And there's a lot of belief that this was a game that was started to help during the winter months to be able to help them process their post-traumatic stress. So there's so many levels of what this game does for folks.
Right.
But I agree with you. I think that there was that part of me being undercover and being a referee, you're still in the midst of all the action, yet you're not the focal point.
Yeah, I hear you. I get it. Bob, we could go on for hours, man. I don't want to keep you that long. And when we get together, I would love to continue, you know, really diving into so much of this. You know, I'm thinking right now of the mission of Legends of Sport, you know, my platform that I started like 7 or 8 years ago. The bottom line mission is helping athletes transition, you know, from a career to post athletic life, and helping those who might need some help, you know, whether it's recovery work or financial or whatever, helping them become marketable again. And, you know, most of these athletes are, you know, they haven't even hit 40 yet. Right. Have you had conversations about PTSD with former players, like people, you don't have to mention names, of course, but players, legends that we would be familiar with and have sort of opened their eyes to the fact that, hey, you know what you're going through is normal. And you talk about that in the book. It's a normal reaction to an abnormal situation.
Correct.
Yeah.
I do. I speak with teams now, individual athletes, different sports. Some bring me in from the NFL, from the NBA, but I also reach out. I reach out to coaches that get fired. Getting fired is a traumatic experience, and there's a shame that goes with that, right? And it's important to speak about. It's normal to get fired in the coaching world. It's not the era like when we first started where Jerry Sloan's there for 20 years, or somebody's there, like Red Auerbach. I mean, this game has changed. The officiating, the whole thing has changed, and so understanding that with those changes comes some emotional baggage that needs to be unpacked. And there's nothing wrong with having the conversation in a safe environment. I'm not asking people to get up on ESPN and tell their story. That's not necessarily what needs to take place. But allowing yourself to have this conversation is extremely important. What you're doing, when you said that you're using this platform to help, I have a saying: if you are what you do, then when you don't, you aren't. If you are what you do, if you're only a photographer, that's all you are. When you stop doing that, you no longer exist. You're much more than that. You're a father, son, but you got all these other titles. And every one of us has all these titles, and they're all full-time titles. They're full-time jobs. So understanding that we are much more than what we are viewed to be. And that is extremely important as well.
I'm thinking of our dear friend Kobe, our colleague, somebody who I spent 20 years with. I'll never get over the fact that he's gone, and how he died with his daughter and 7 other people. It's just, I have nightmares about it to this day, right? And somehow, the Lord above put me together with a guy named Mike Asner, who was feeling the same trauma. Lifelong Laker fan, big Kobe fan, and he needed to connect the creative world, who was expressing itself through murals of Kobe, Gigi, throughout the world simultaneously at the same time. It was crazy. Within weeks of the tragedy, hundreds of murals were up. As of today, there's over 650 murals all over the world. People expressing grief through a creative process. In the history of the world, no public figure has ever elicited that kind of outpouring of creative love, right? But it gives us all a place to go and to share. And it's exactly what you're talking about, because if we're all carrying around this grief, but we can't talk about it, or we have no one to talk about it with, or look at a beautiful mural, a painting, or talk to the artist, it's helped me a lot. And that's kind of my mission now.
And I'm glad you brought Kobe up, because it brings a smile to my face, right? Because we all knew the competitiveness, and I remember having a game on a Sunday afternoon. They were in Sunday whites, and right off the tip, play goes to the hole, and I can't remember who the player was, but Kobe fouls him. And so I go 24, and I go to the table, and as I turn, Kobe's walking towards me, and he's got a scowl on his face, and that scowl look that he would give. He never really got real angry, but he gave you a scowl. He gave you a look like he's looking right through. And I'm thinking, he's not going to complain about this call. I mean, we're going to have a long game. If this is like he's complaining about this, is obviously he hit the guy. Now he comes right up to me, and he walks around, and he comes back on my right shoulder, and he leans down. He says, "What was it like wearing a wire with those mob guys?" And he played me. And I start to smile. I wasn't a smile guy on the court. I was like all business. But if you listen to Mike Breen is saying, "Oh, Kobe's giving Delaney an earful about that call." He was talking about, but he knew, and he played me. And it was his way of just saying, "Hey, no big deal about the call." He had an amazing way about him.
Well, it's the second pillar of the Mamba mentality, which is curiosity. And even with you on the court, he needed to. He actually was grilling you. He wanted to know what that was like. He had that creative mind. That curiosity is amazing. I mean, I saw it. You saw it. He picked the brain of Michael Jordan, the young Kobe, during a free throw during a game. I mean, who does that? Anyway.
I have that photo that I use when I'm speaking to teams in different groups, and I think that Kobe's death struck us in such a way because there was such an identity for people. We were fortunate to know Kobe, but a lot of folks felt like they knew him because he was in their living room.
Mm-hmm.
He created memories with their families where they sat around and watched.
Yeah.
And then while his death was through a vehicle that was taking kids to a game, we've all either driven kids or have been driven as kids to games with family members. So there were so many connections, subliminal connections to what took place there, that there was a feeling of connection in so many ways with Kobe.
Absolutely. It's so well said. Absolutely. Bob, what's next, man? Are we going to see a book of Covert? I mean, seriously, I know you optioned the rights at some point. I mean, this would be an unbelievable book, you know, and continuing into your life as an NBA ref and what you're doing now with PTSD. I mean, I'd be the first one in line to buy that ticket.
Yeah, three different groups have owned it. Martin Bregman, who did all of Alan Alda and Al Pacino's movies, had it for a period of time, and then when he passed, it went to ESPN when they were doing the movies, and they did a script, and the script wasn't to the liking of everyone, myself, and then it got kind of like ABC and ESPN got out of the movie business, and then Ron Shelton had it for a period of time.
I had Ron. I wish I had known that because I had Ron on the podcast last year. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and he was enthusiastic about it, and for whatever reason, it didn't click. I'm sure at some point there's others that are looking at it now.
Yeah.
When it happens, it'll happen when the timing is right, or the timing will be right. The focus that I have right now is on that book, Heroes Are Human, Lessons in Resilience, Courage, and wisdom from the Covert front lines. And I like using those words of courage and wisdom because all too often we've kind of painted a picture of negativity around post-traumatic stress. I like to talk about PTG, post-traumatic growth. I like to refer to it as an injury versus a disorder. Post-traumatic stress injury. And I think that there's ways that we can frame this to have conversation, but in the conversations that I've had with doctors and nurses on this COVID-19 fight, there's such a parallel between those that I've worked with that have on the battlefields, whether it be on the battlefields of foreign soil or on our own home turf, or firefighters in burning buildings. And I'll just give you one. A nurse had told me that, a critical care nurse, that she had dealt with so many COVID patients, and she just wanted to chill out and go on a lake with her husband for the day. And as they were coming in at the end of the day, she was going to tie the boat off at the front as they were coming in the dock, and she started crying uncontrollably. And her husband had to console her. He ties the boat off. And what had happened, Andy, when they pulled it into dock, she saw a small boat on the land that was covered with a tarp that was the same color of the body bag she had been putting patients into. And she saw every one of their faces. She knew every one of their names. And she was able to have her emotional outbreak. These kinds of experiences are going on throughout the world with COVID. Those that are in the medical field have not seen this kind of death. They have not been the hand holder of those dying. Family members would normally be there. When they are doing brain surgery or fixing any other kind of limb, they're not afraid of bringing that injury home to their family. They're living with bringing that fear of bringing COVID home to the family. So these past couple of years have been an emotional drain on the healthcare profession. Just the same way that I've had like this desire to help those who serve us in the military, law enforcement, I have that same kind of passion right now for the healthcare workers. We owe these folks. If we're clapping and banging pans when they're coming off shifts, we have other ways we can be of help to them.
Yeah, I hear you, Bob. Well, keep doing the work, man. I mean, you're leading the way. If we can, Legends of Sport, collaborate, help, and raise awareness in any way that we can, let's figure that out. Because
I appreciate it, man. And I know you will. I know you will.
Well, you're a great man, great friend, and I appreciate you taking the time and carving out the time today, Bob. I mean, really. And I miss seeing you on the court, man.
Well, unless you can get a segue for me to go up and down the floor. If they allow referees to use segue, I'll come back.
Yeah. That would be.
And the other thing, Andy, right now,
one too.
on the couch, I don't miss any calls.
Right.
I'm really good from the couch.
There you go. Well, listen, man, I hope I get to see you soon. Let's definitely stay in touch. And thanks again for being a great guest and a great friend, Bob.
Stay healthy, stay safe. Take care of you.
Thank you, my friend. Thank you. Well, I am so grateful to Bob for taking the time to chat with me so we can bring this episode to all of you. I must say, I miss Bob on the court doing his thing as an NBA ref. However, his story is so incredibly fascinating and deep. So I want to thank you, Bob, for the work you are doing to raise awareness about PTSD across the world. I encourage everyone to read Bob's two books, Covert and Surviving the Shadows. And I look forward to his next book, Heroes Are Human, about how PTSD affects those on the front lines of COVID. Thanks as always to my producer and head researcher, Veronica Ahn. Remember, folks, that you can find all our episodes on the iHeart app and website, as well as on your favorite podcast platform, including Apple and Spotify, and on our YouTube channel. Keep following us on Instagram at Legends of Sport, our Twitter at Legends_of Sport. Our website is legendsofsport.net, and our TikTok and YouTube channels, Legends of Sport. You can find my photography on Instagram at ADB Photo Inc. So I'll see you all next time with another great episode. Until then, stay safe and stay well. And as Bob would say, take care of you.